For my political economy presentation with Professor Murphy at Chapman University, I decided to take a deeper look into Paul Collier's thoughts on the resource trap in the poor countries of the globe, specifically the case of conflict minerals in the eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa. After reading Collier's book, The Bottom Billion, and as an environmental science major, I became quite interested in researching and applying what Collier calls the resource curse in a current situation that is happening in Africa. First, it's important to get an overall idea of what exactly the resource trap or curse is and how it applies to the bottom billion. According to Collier, the resource trap is one of the four main reasons why poor nations cannot escape their low standing in society. One might think that having a surplus of natural resources would promote prosperity, which is sometimes the case, but when found in countries with a lack of proper governance, slow growth rates, and poverty, it can do just the opposite. The excess of revenues over all costs can significantly reduce growth. Economists refer to this surplus of revenues as rents. Countries with a large resource discoveries can end up poor, with the lost growth offsetting the one of gain in income provided by the rents. What the poor countries with resources need to do is focus on using the rents towards growth and avoid complacency or the consequences of a boom and bust pattern of income. Also, the countries must show some form of intrinsic motivations for prosperity stemming from within and avoid personal patronage from government or rebel leaders. Another quote that I thought was interesting by Collier is he claims that the heart of the resource curse is that resource rents make democracy malfunction. So let's now see exactly why these natural resources and the resulting rents can cause the trap. Often the surplus of cash can alter how electoral competition takes place. Voters can be bribed with public money, and often this becomes accepted. So rather than delivering public services like security, the politics is based around personal patronage for the interests of government officials interested in revenue from resources. This alone can often lead to autocracy and not democracy in poor, underdeveloped countries, furthering the problem. Also, the establishment of restraints on using resource revenue is crucial to the development of a country. Collier points out that economic development can induce gradual institutional change, which is exactly what these poor countries need, but this change results from the proper amount of restraints, along with a checks and balances type of system where resource rents and revenues are used responsibly. The restraints are most effective when created before the exporting of natural resources to provide a set of guidelines for economic incomes. Again, this is generally not the case in the bottom billion. Something Collier points out is that a low-income, resource-rich society that either is an ethnically diverse autocracy or requires the instant lopsided democracy of electoral competition without checks and balances is likely to misuse its opportunities in ways that make it fail to grow. Before we get into the Democratic Republic of Congo's resource trap, let's see how a poor country might be able to escape this trap. Unfortunately, aid is not going to help unless it is put towards transformation efforts by the people. The resources already obviously supply revenue. Perhaps the creation of international norms and standards might help. There are a few ways of doing this, but at the end of this presentation, I will apply two of these to the case of the Democratic Republic of Congo. One of them could involve more transparent processes in resource exports, economics, and revenues would put pressure on how rents and officials are using them, making larger companies using the natural resources accountable in the financial and government processes, which could increase support to these countries. Finding a way so that citizens can see how money coming in from buyers of the resources being used would again increase peer pressure on the governments. In addition, coming up with an international standard of dealing with volatility in resource revenues would help developing countries manage income. And finally, increasing pressure from non-government organizations on big companies using the resources and how they provide their income can bring awareness to companies and help exporters in the long run. So let's get a little bit of background on the Congo. The roots of government instability in this country trace back to the 18th century. A harsh history of colonialism and exploitation of natural resources upset the movement of goods and people during the colonizing years. After struggling for independence from European powers, the land eventually came under the control of Mobutu Sese Seko in 1965. Mobutu used the country's mineral wealth to enrich himself and his allies. He even changed the name of the country to Zaire. He is thought to have stolen $5 billion from the country, moving funds into international banks and investments. Following the Rwandan genocide of 1994, he allowed Hutu military forces who directed the genocide in the Congo into his land. This promoted the invasion of Congo in 1996 by Uganda and Rwanda in pursuit of the Hutu rebels. And after invasion, they began to focus on the control and exploitation of Congo's mineral resources instead. Currently, Joseph Kabila is the Congo's first democratic president, elected in 2001. Kabila now faces a weak government, political and security challenges, rapes and murders of civilians, and the presence of Rwandan rebels and Congolese army militias controlling mines and transporting natural resources out of the Congo. Now here are a few maps that I thought were interesting to look at. The first one at the top it's the direct outline of the Democratic Republic of Congo and where it is placed in Africa. And the next one kind of shows a map of the mineral locations in the Congo that this conflict is happening over, and you can see that they are mostly located in the eastern region of the country. So what's going on in the Congo today? Today, a surplus of minerals such as gold, coltan, and tin are being mined and extracted in artesian manners by civilians under the control of rebel groups. In addition, neighboring Uganda and Rwanda are thought to be backing the rebel groups, and some claim that the weak government of the Congo is even allowing them to do so. As a result, minerals are exported and illegally taxed to importers, then used to manufacture supplies by demanding consumers like us, while deaths and rapes of civilians continue. So here are some facts about the conflict minerals. It is estimated that in 2008, Rwandan Hutu rebels obtained 75% of their revenue from taxation of Congo minerals, and that the Congolese army received up to 95%. Rebels and armies profit from mineral trade by controlling the mines directly. In fact, 12 of the 13 major mines in the eastern region of the Congo are controlled by armed groups. They can also illegally tax the transport and trade of minerals along routes they control. $185 million provided to armed groups in 2008 is predicted from mine mineral exports. Mines support citizens at extremely low incomes, if any. It's estimated that 10 million civilians are in some way dependent on the mining industry. Minerals are transported directly by hand from the mines to airplanes through middlemen and to Congolese export agents, then to foreign importers along illegal trade routes sometimes, and then eventually to consumers. Okay, so let's take a look at a few of the important minerals that are mined in this area. The leading mineral contributing to armed groups is called cassiterite, also known as tin. Congo produces over 24,000 metric tons of tin, or 6 to 8% of the global production. Instability in the Congo and tight supply contributes to global price volatility. There was a 31% price increase coinciding with a rebel offensive against the country's primary tin trading center. This tin is used for electronics, cell phones, tin plates, chemicals, brass, glass manufacturing, and so many other items that exist in America and other developed countries today. Another prominent mineral is called tungsten, or also known as wolframite. The annual production in Congo is around 1,300 metric tons, or 4% of global production. Congo is the world's fifth largest producer of this mineral. It contributed $7.4 million in 2008 to armed forces. It's used in hard metal, steel, cutting tools, bearings, and pistons, as well as other mechanics. Another one is tantalum, also known as coltan. It's the first conflict metal from Congo to be the subject of global concern in the early 2000s as the electronic industry grew. Congo produces 155 metric tons annually, or 15 to 20% of the global production. It is estimated that it provided armed groups with about $12 million in 2008. It's used in automotive, electronics, phones, computers, superalloys, and cutting tools. And finally, we all know about gold. Gold is the smallest conflict mineral by volume, but second to tin in its contribution to armed groups at $50 million in 2008. 95% of Congo's gold is traded informally, making it hard to track in companies seeking to stop the cycle of conflict minerals consumption. It's used to make jewelry, obviously, and coins, as well as some medical equipment. So what can be done? As I said in the beginning, there are two ways I will use that could help stop the trade of conflict minerals from the Democratic Republic of Congo. One has to do with creating more transparent processes and correctly identifying the supply of chain of mined minerals to companies to us. This would involve 4 main steps. The first one would be about tracing, meaning that the companies should determine their sources of their minerals in the supplies that they are making and see whether or not they are coming from these mines in the Congo. Companies should also examine their mineral supply chains to ensure taxes are legally and transparently paid to Congolese government and not to army groups. They should then certify and declare that they are making conflict-free electronics. And finally, when doing this, consumers will become aware of what they are buying and why it is important to seek out conflict-free electronics and supplies. By making the processes more transparent, the rebel groups will decrease in violence, hopefully, and bribery once companies start to care and take action towards the minerals they are purchasing and their production. And here's a good example of the supply chain I found. And as you can see, the armed groups control the mines and the transit routes. They buy the weapons from the money they get from the exporting of the minerals. And they just continue to do this violent chain of mining and exporting to get money to supply their own needs. Rwanda and Uganda and Kenya, minerals are transported there, and they're then again able to transport these minerals out to East Asian companies where they then smelt and process them into minerals and metals that can be further used in manufacturing. And finally, after another series of events, these final forms of mechanics from the minerals are transported to US and Europe and sold to consumers in cell phones, music players, digital cameras, and other devices. Another thing that might be able to inform the rest of the world about what is going on in Congo would to require that governments identify and remove minerals that are outsourced by Africa to them. Of course, this removal would require alternative forms of metals, but that's another story. Companies could also support stronger international diplomatic efforts for peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Increasing public-private partnerships might encourage investments and support of Congo's weak economy. And finally, supplying tools to the growing government in Congo to help with infrastructure without undermining their independence could possibly help. And here I found is a chart that shows projected companies' engagement and progress in finding conflict minerals in their materials that they are using to manufacture items for us. This is from 2010, and I thought it was pretty interesting to take a look at. And you could see where some of our daily computers, phones, and other electronics come from, and what these companies might or might not be doing about where they are getting their minerals. And finally, I would like to inform you that you can help. We can make a difference in the situation of conflict minerals in the Congo. Of course, we first have to realize what's going on, and then we have to figure out how it relates to us. And finally, we can take direct action to stop the cycle from continuing if we choose to identify where these minerals are coming from and support companies and governments that are also in support of helping the Congo and the mineral conflict. So thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the information in this lesson.